doing well. My name's Katie and I make book-related videos every single Wednesday, and today I'm going to be filming a spoiler-free review of Artemis by Andy Weir. And I just want to say I've started this video I think 10 times and I'm just stumbling over my words. I'm a lot more out of it than I normally am, so I just want to apologize up front. But work has been insane and I'm filming this on Tuesday, and Monday night was the company Christmas party with an open bar, and while I'm not going to complain about there being an open bar, I just want to know whose idea it was to have that on a Monday. And if the name Andy Weir sounds familiar, I'm sure many of you are aware that he wrote the very famous book and movie The Martian. So again, everything's gonna be spoiler free and I'm gonna get into a quick summary and then pros and cons. So for a brief summary, this takes place on Artemis, which is the first city on the moon, and our protagonist is Jazz. She's very kind of spunky, sarcastic, sexy. She's also very poor. On Artemis, there are very clear levels of wealth and she is at the bottom. So she does a fair amount of illegal things to make money. Nothing too harmful, but just some illegal stuff here and there. Because she already kind of is on the wrong side of the law sometimes, and she also happens to be incredibly intelligent, she receives an offer from a very wealthy man to basically lead this heist, and at the end of it she'll receive tons of money, which is essentially her goal in life. So getting into pros, I will say I thought the writing was decent. I had no complaints there. There is also a lot of comedy in this book, and I'm going to talk about some of it in the cons, but in terms of pros, there were quite a few jokes that did land that I did find myself chuckling. For example, there was one joke, and this isn't a spoiler, but there's one joke in a rather serious scene where a guy who's very attractive and is also kind of the law on the moon, she remembers that when she was doing something illegal and he had chased her and like held her down, and she's like, sometimes I think about that at night. And so there were little moments here and there that did make me laugh. And that's all I have for pros, and the rest of this video is not surprisingly going to be cons, the things I did not like about this book. But I will say up front, I didn't enjoy this book, but maybe, you know what? I was about to do a disclaimer, but I'm not going to. I'm allowed to dislike this book and not have to apologize for it. So the main reason that I did not like this book is I was incredibly bored. And if you guys have watched my channel for any length of time, I think you know that I don't need a book to be a certain genre for it to entertain me. Yes, I read a lot of crime novels and a lot of psychological thrillers, but I do read outside that realm a fair amount. I would say I read 50% thrillers, 50% other stuff. So it's definitely not that just because this was sci-fi, I didn't like it. I actually think that this is very accessible sci-fi. I was personally just not interested in the heist whatsoever. I think that if you're reading this book and you get to the scene pretty early on where this billionaire suggests the heist to Jazz, if you hear the heist and what it's going to be and you're like, oh, I find that really interesting, then I think you'll find the rest of the book really interesting. But even when he explained what the heist was, I personally was just not very intrigued. And going back to what I was saying about this being kind of light sci-fi, this almost is a little bit of a crime novel within some areas, and I think that's another aspect I really didn't enjoy about the book. It felt kind of like a light sci-fi novel. It almost felt like I was reading a video game in a weird way and not a sci-fi novel, and it also didn't feel like a good crime novel either, and I read a ton of crime. And I'm not saying a book has to fall cookie cutter into a certain genre by any means, but I just feel like this is a sci-fi novel on the moon, and I was so excited to just be on the moon in this book. I felt like there were so many cool things that Andy Weir could have done with the setting of this city on the moon, and I just don't feel like he did that much. And like I said, there's this crime subplot that actually, I shouldn't even say subplot, it takes up a fair amount of the book dealing with the mafia and stuff like that, and I just did not care. And again, this is gonna come down to whether or not you happen to find that interesting. But for me personally, if I'm gonna read about the mafia, I want it to be like super gritty and make me on edge, and that's just not what this was. Now I will say, and I should have put this in pros, the one aspect or plot point that I did really enjoy were these letters that Jazz would exchange with this boy who was growing up on Earth. So through that you're getting to see what Earth was like, what growing up on the moon was like, and what Jazz was like when she was younger. And even though it's a ton of exposition and it's just sort of the author telling you, here, this is what Jazz's life was like and why she is the way she is, I still really enjoyed those. And finally, the thing I disliked most about this book would have to be Jazz. Now in my review on Goodreads, which was just, I think it was originally 2 sentences, if that, I don't have it memorized, but I said something along the lines of, it felt like a bunch of young Redditor boys got together and created what they thought would be like a sexy, sarcastic, spunky idea of what a girl would be like, and that's what Jazz is. I did get some angry replies, and to that I would say, one, it's a joke, I'm on Reddit all the time, but the best example I can give for why Jazz felt like a caricature of a sexy, smart, spunky, sarcastic girl and not an actual female was the scene that I saw someone else point out, and I actually saw quite a few people point this scene out in their reviews, but there's a scene where she's grabbing some clothes that are nearby, and so she's just in like a guy's like long button down shirt, and then of course the nerdy guy happens to walk in and see her, and she looks down, and I forget exactly how she says it, but it's some comment like where she's like, wow, whoops, I guess I'm just looking really sexy right now. And of course it's a good thing for women to feel confident and sexy. I think we should all feel that way. I think that's a wonderful thing, but the way it's written, it just made me think for a second, okay, it's very obvious a dude wrote this book. And are there, of course, you know, cheesy romance novels where women sexualize men? Of course, but that's not what this book is, and that's not what we're talking about. Even some of the other characters, like I mentioned, the sort of geekier side character guy, he just felt like a stereotype in all the conversations he would have with her where he doesn't know how to talk to girls. It just felt too on the nose and too cheesy. So the main reason I say that this feels like a failed attempt at writing a female is because I'm sure, at least I would assume, you guys can disagree with me, I assume that Andy Weir made every intention of writing a well-crafted, interesting female, and I just think he kind of failed at that. But you know, do I hate Andy Weir as an author? No, of course not. Like I said, I just think I didn't really like the plot. I didn't find it very funny or interesting. But again, that's just gonna come down to your personal preference. There are a lot of people whose reviews I really respect who absolutely loved this book and thought it was just a ton of fun, kind of similar in style to, say, Ready Player One. So in the end, this book was definitely not my cup of tea, but definitely let me know if you've read it, what you thought about it. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.